Welcome, friend. Tonight, we travel back to 14th century England to learn the art of survival. So go ahead and find your favorite spot. Let your shoulders relax and take a nice, slow breath. There is no rush here. Just settle in and let the day fade away. Where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it for you? Is it late evening, or are you just stealing a quiet moment in the middle of your wonderfully hectic day? If you enjoy these little trips through time, a quick follow or subscribe ensures you'll always have a seat reserved for our next story. Now, as your breathing deepens, imagine this. The familiar hum of modern life is gone. You are standing on a small plot of land. The year is 1350. The great sickness has passed, leaving behind a silence that feels both like a blessing and a curse. You are a farmer, and your world has been turned upside down. Your task is simple to say, but hard to do. You must survive. The first thing you notice is the silence. It isn't the quiet of early morning, the gentle peace before the village stirs. This is a deep, hollow silence, the kind that presses in on your ears. The rooster, your unfailing herald of the dawn, has not crowed for weeks. There is no distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer, no murmur of conversation from the neighboring hut, no laughter from children chasing a runaway pig. There is only the sound of your own ragged breath in the small, dark space of your wattle-and-daub home, a construction of woven sticks and mud that feels more like a tomb than a shelter. A sharp, scraping need claws at the back of your throat. It is a thirst so profound it feels as if your entire body is made of dust. This desperate need for water forces you to move. Your limbs feel like lead, heavy and unresponsive, after days of lying on your straw pallet, listening to the world die. Pushing yourself up, your hand brushes against the rough, uneven surface of the wall, the dried mud and embedded sticks, a familiar but cold comfort. The small space is filled with ghosts. You see your mother by the hearth, your father mending a tool, their presence so strong it's a physical ache in your chest. But the hearth is cold, the tools untouched. You are alone. The emptiness of the hut is a mirror to the emptiness of the village, and the grief is a weight that makes each movement a monumental effort. Because of this, the thirst feels like the only real thing left, a brutal commander demanding action. Stumbling towards the door, you push aside the heavy wool cloth that serves to keep out the night's chill. The light that spills in is blindingly normal, a stark contrast to the unnatural quiet. It slices across the packed earth floor, illuminating the absence of life within. You squint, your eyes slow to adjust, and the simple act of seeing the world outside sends a wave of dizziness through you. Your hand finds the rough-hewn doorframe for support, your knuckles white as you grip the wood. The thirst is a fire in your throat, a constant, painful reminder of your most basic need. For a moment, the world swims, and the only anchor you have is the solid wood beneath your fingers and the scraping demand for water. You take a hesitant step outside, your bare feet sinking slightly into the soft dirt. The morning sun warms your face, and you instinctively lift a hand to shield your eyes, a simple gesture that feels strange and new in this empty world. The village is just as you last saw it, yet utterly changed. Weeds have already begun to creep up the sides of huts whose doors hang open, swinging gently in a breeze you can't feel. A wooden bucket lies on its side in the middle of the path, a forgotten relic of a life that has vanished. Everything is frozen in a state of sudden interruption. This stillness is more terrifying than any scream, a silent testament to the swift, merciless passage of the great sickness, a pestilence that historical records will one day call the Black Death.
Your gaze falls upon the village well, its stone curb and wooden winch standing not 50 paces away. It is the heart of the village, the place where gossip was shared and friendships were forged over the shared work of drawing water. The sight of it now sends a fresh wave of need through you. Your throat constricts, and you can almost imagine the feel of cool, life-giving water splashing on your face. It would be so easy. A few minutes of effort, and the burning in your throat would be gone. The sheer proximity is a powerful temptation, a promise of immediate relief that makes your exhausted body ache with longing. But this simple solution is tangled with a terrible memory. You remember your neighbor, a strong man who always had a joke on his lips, fetching water from that very well. You see him in your mind's eye, his face flushed with fever, his hands trembling as he worked the rope. He drank deeply, desperate for relief from the inner fire consuming him. He was dead by nightfall. You saw others, too, who sought comfort from the well water, only to be seized by the sickness with a new and terrible speed. The pestilence had many faces, a fact that scholars will debate for centuries. Some were struck with great, dark swellings in the armpit and groin, while others developed a sickness of the lungs that could pass from one person to another on a simple breath. The well water seemed to connect them all, a shared source of life that had somehow become a source of death. Turning away from the well feels like an act of immense will. Your eyes scan the other direction, towards the dense woods that border the fallow fields. A small stream, fed by a spring deep within the forest, runs there. The water is clear and cold, constantly moving over smooth stones. It is a much longer walk, perhaps a mile or more, along a path that is likely overgrown and difficult. The thought of the journey makes your muscles protest. Every part of you feels weak, hollowed out by hunger and sorrow. Your body is a poor, unreliable vessel, and the idea of forcing it across such a distance feels like a foolish gamble. The safety of the stream is a distant, uncertain promise, while the well is a present, tangible temptation.
Your mind becomes a battlefield. The thirst is a relentless voice, whispering of the sheer foolishness of walking so far. The sickness has passed, it argues. The water is surely clean by now. It's just water. You are weak. You won't make it to the stream. Your tongue feels thick in your mouth, and you swallow against the dry rasp in your throat. You can almost taste the slightly earthy flavor of the well water, a taste you have known your entire life. Your body leans instinctively towards the well, a single step, then another. It is the path of least resistance, the answer to the immediate, agonizing demand that is screaming inside you. This path is simple, direct, and offers a quick end to your current suffering. But then another image rises, sharp and unwelcome. It is the face of your younger sister, her eyes wide with fear and confusion as the fever took her. You remember giving her a cup of water from that well, believing you were helping, comforting her. The memory is a physical blow, knocking the breath from your lungs and replacing the arguments of thirst with a cold, clear terror. The well is not just a source of water. It is a monument to your loss, a place of ghosts and regret. That single horrific memory is more powerful than any physical craving. The thought of drinking from it now feels like a betrayal of those you have lost, an invitation to the same fate that claimed them. The internal battle ends as quickly as it began. Fear, sharp and cold, is a more powerful master than thirst. You turn your back on the well, a decisive movement that sends a ripple of pain through your stiff muscles. You will go to the stream. The choice is made not from logic or a calculation of risk, but from a raw, instinctual recoil from a place of death. The journey will be difficult, perhaps impossible, yet the alternative feels like surrendering. As you take your first deliberate step towards the woods, you understand that this is not just about finding water. It is about choosing to live in a world that seems determined to let you die.
The path is even more difficult than you imagined. Thorny brambles, which would have been cut back by diligent villagers, now reach across the walkway, tearing at your simple tunic. Your feet, accustomed to the well-trodden ground, stumble over roots and loose stones hidden by overgrown grass. Breathing becomes a conscious effort, each inhale a shallow gasp that does little to quiet the pounding in your chest. You have to stop frequently, leaning against the rough bark of an oak tree to catch your breath, your body trembling with weakness. The world seems to be actively resisting your progress, every obstacle a test of your resolve. During one of these pauses, a sound breaks the oppressive silence, the clear, simple song of a cuckoo. It is so normal, so out of place in this dead world that you almost laugh. It is a small, ridiculous flicker of life, asserting itself against the vast quiet. The sound gives you a strange burst of energy, a reminder that not everything has been silenced. A little further on, you pass into a patch of forest where the canopy of leaves blocks much of the sun. In the cool dimness, the rich scent of damp earth and decaying leaves rises to meet you. It is a clean smell, a smell of life and renewal, so different from the unhealthy air that had clung to the village for so long. Finally, you hear it, a low, murmuring sound that grows stronger with each pained step. The sound of moving water. Pushing through a final curtain of low-hanging branches, you see the stream. It is just as you remembered, a ribbon of clear water tumbling over a bed of gray and brown stones. It is the most beautiful thing you have ever seen. You half stumble, half fall the last few feet to the bank, your knees sinking into the soft, muddy earth at the water's edge. For a moment, you just stare, listening to the gentle gurgle, the sound of life itself. The journey has taken everything you have, but it has brought you here.
The final act is simple, almost holy. You cup your hands and dip them into the shockingly cold water, bringing the small, trembling vessel to your lips. The water is pure and tasteless, and as it washes the dust from your throat, it feels like you are drinking hope. You drink again and again, not stopping until the frantic, scraping thirst has been transformed into a dull, satisfied ache. You are exhausted. Your body screams with the effort of the journey, but you are alive. The weight of this first crucial choice, the choice to endure rather than to risk, settles deep into your bones, a foundation for all the choices that must follow. This chapter covers the protagonist's awakening in a village devastated by the Black Death and their first critical decision, choosing to undertake a long, difficult walk to a clean stream for water, instead of risking the potentially contaminated village well. The protagonist has successfully reached the stream and quenched their immediate thirst, but they are physically exhausted and far from their shelter, facing the next challenge of survival. The long walk from the stream has taken what little strength you had left. Each step back to your small hut was a victory against the trembling in your legs, a reminder of the choice you made to seek clean water, no matter the cost. Now, inside the familiar quiet of the single room, you lean against the wall made of woven sticks and mud, called wattle-and-daub. Your breathing is slow and deep, an attempt to calm the exhaustion that makes your vision swim. The silence in here is different from the silence of the village. It is a silence you have known your whole life, filled with the ghosts of family sounds. A cool draft slips through a crack near the floor, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves from outside, a constant reminder of the world's slow turning. Your gaze falls upon the small sack leaning in the corner. It is a coarse, lumpy thing, but it holds everything that is left. You push yourself from the wall and shuffle towards it, your bare feet cold on the packed earth floor. The moment your fingers touch the rough fibers of the sack, you know the truth. It is pitifully light. Your heart sinks. This was meant to be shared among your whole family, a small reserve against a hard season, but now you are the only one left to eat it. With careful, deliberate movements, you untie the knot and pour a tiny mound of grain into your cupped hand. The grains are pale and hard, each one a promise of another day of life, but there are so few, so terribly few. As you stare at the small pile in your palm, a sound from the doorway makes you flinch. It is not a knock, but a soft scraping noise, as if something heavy has just been leaned against the wood frame. Your head snaps up, every muscle in your body tensed. The door, unlatched, swings inward with a low groan. A figure stands there, silhouetted against the gray afternoon light.
As your eyes adjust, you recognize the shape of your neighbor from the next hut over. They are not standing so much as propped against the frame, their face shadowed and gaunt. Their eyes, wide and dark in a thin face, are fixed on the grain in your hand. No words are spoken, for none are needed. Their plea is in the hollows of their cheeks and the desperate stillness of their posture. Instantly, a cold, hard knot forms in your stomach. It is the instinct of a cornered animal, a fierce urge to protect what is yours. Every single grain in your hand is a shield against the gnawing hunger that you know is coming. This is your survival. Your mind screams that sharing is a fool's errand. It will not save them, and it will only hasten your own end. To give away any of this food is to give away a piece of your own life. You could simply turn your back, close the door, and pretend you saw nothing. In a world where so many have been taken, one more loss would hardly be noticed. Looking after yourself is the only sensible thing to do.
But then you look at their face again. This is not a stranger. This is the person whose laughter you once heard across the small yard, the one who nodded a greeting to you on the path to the fields. Before the silence, there was a village. There were people. A memory surfaces, unbidden, of a time when a neighbor in need would have been unthinkable to ignore. The sight of this familiar face, lost in a sea of emptiness, pulls at a different kind of instinct, not of survival, but of shared humanity. Turning them away would be like admitting that the world of people, of community, is truly gone forever, and that you are nothing more than a solitary creature scrabbling for scraps. Sharing means you both might starve, but perhaps you would not starve alone. You are torn between the cold, clear logic of self-preservation and the fading warmth of a world that was. Your hand, holding the precious grains, feels impossibly heavy. The future, a terrifying unknown, hangs on this single, small decision. Do you secure your own next meal, or do you cling to the last thread of what it meant to be a neighbor? After a moment that stretches into an eternity, watching the silent plea in their eyes, you make a choice. You extend your hand, palm open, offering half of the tiny portion. There is no grand gesture, just a simple movement that feels like it weighs more than anything you have ever lifted. The neighbor's own hand, thin and trembling, comes forward to accept the offering. Their fingers are cold as they brush against yours, scooping the grains with a desperate quickness. They do not say thank you. Their gaze meets yours for a brief second, and in that look you see not gratitude, but a shared, terrible understanding. It is an acknowledgement of the world you both now inhabit, a place where such a small gift is everything. They give a slow, weak nod, then turn without a word and disappear back into the gray light, leaving you standing in the doorway of your hut. You look down at the few grains remaining in your own hand. The pile seems impossibly small now, barely enough to blunt the edge of your hunger for even a few hours. A shiver of fear runs through you, a cold dread at what you have just done. You have willingly given away your own security, however small it was. The practical part of your mind tells you that you have made a grave mistake, one that you might pay for with your life in the days to come. The logic is undeniable, and it settles like a stone in your gut, a chilling companion to the emptiness there. Yet, as you retreat back into the dimness of your hut, the silence within feels subtly different. It is no longer just the silence of loss, but something else. By sharing what little you had, you cast a vote against the complete desolation of the world. You chose to believe that another person's survival had meaning, even when weighed against your own. It was not a choice for the future, but a choice for this very moment. A refusal to let the last embers of human connection be extinguished by fear. You have less food, but perhaps you are not quite as alone as you were before. The decision rests inside you, a complex mix of terror and a strange, fragile warmth. You are left with the immediate consequence of a lighter grain sack and a deeper hunger. But you also carry the unspoken bond forged in that moment of shared desperation, a fragile link to another living soul in a world of ghosts. This single act has changed the path you walk, shaping not just your chances of survival, but the kind of survivor you are becoming. The last handful of grain you shared with your neighbor is now a memory, a faint warmth of connection in a world grown cold. That warmth, however, does not fill your belly. A persistent, hollow ache has settled deep inside you, a constant reminder that the small sack in your hut is now truly empty. Every movement feels sluggish, a conscious effort to push your limbs through a growing weakness. You know this feeling cannot be ignored for long. It is a slow tide pulling you under. Consequently, your gaze keeps drifting to the dark line of trees that borders the fallow fields, a place of deep shadows and uncertain promise. The woods have always been there, but now they seem to call to you with a new, urgent voice. Your first steps are towards the familiar edge of the forest, where sunlight still manages to pierce the canopy. The air here smells of dry grass and sun-warmed pine needles. It is the place villagers have always come for a quick basket of berries or a handful of nuts. You run a hand over the thorny branches of a bramble bush. The leaves are green and healthy, but where vibrant fruit should be, there are only empty stems. Others, driven by the same gnawing hunger, have been here before you. Every easily reached bush has been stripped clean, the ground around it trampled by desperate feet. The disappointment is a heavy weight, adding to the fatigue that already pulls at your shoulders. You stand at the threshold where the familiar woods end and the true wilderness begins. Deeper in, the trees stand closer together, their ancient branches woven into a dense roof that turns midday into twilight. The sounds change, the cheerful chirping of field birds giving way to the lonely call of a cuckoo and the rustle of unseen things in the undergrowth. A part of you, exhausted from the long walk for water days ago and weakened by a sparse diet, argues for caution. It tells you to stay near the light, to conserve what little strength you have. Yet, the relentless ache in your stomach argues back with a fiercer voice. It speaks of the promise of untouched fungi beneath damp logs, of tender roots hidden in the dark soil, of a bird's nest tucked away from careless eyes. It is the voice of sheer necessity. The gnawing hunger wins the argument. You push aside a low-hanging branch dripping with cool dew and step into the deeper shadows. The scent of the air changes immediately, shifting to the rich, dark smell of damp earth and decaying leaves.
Moss, soft as felt, carpets the stones under your feet, and you must place your steps carefully to avoid slipping. This part of the woods belongs to the lord of the manor, and while the reeve's eyes are unlikely to reach this far in these troubled times, the old fear of being caught poaching, taking anything from the lord's land, is a faint prickle at the back of your neck. But the risk of the reeve's anger feels distant compared to the immediate certainty of starvation. Your world has become a series of gambles, and this is simply the next one.
Your eyes slowly adjust to the gloom, and you begin to scan the forest floor with a focus you have never known before. You are not just looking, you are hunting for anything that might sustain you. Your fingers sift through the leaf litter, feeling for the telltale shape of an acorn or a buried hazelnut missed by the squirrels. You recall snippets of your grandmother's talk about which plants could be used for pottage, a simple stew of boiled grains and vegetables. You see the three-cornered leaves of wood sorrel, and you pluck a few, chewing on one. The sharp, sour taste is a shock to your tongue, but it is something. It is food. This knowledge, once just idle chatter, is now the most valuable thing you possess. Further on, near the base of a fallen oak, you see them. A cluster of broad-capped mushrooms, their tops the color of pale honey. Your heart gives a hopeful leap. You kneel down, your fingers brushing against their smooth, slightly damp skin. A flicker of doubt holds you back. Some fungi grant life, while others bring a swift, agonizing death. You try to remember the lessons. Avoid the ones with bright colors, the ones with a ring on their stem. These look safe, much like the ones you have seen in the village market in better days. Taking a chance, you carefully break them from the decaying wood, their earthy smell filling your senses as you place them in the small cloth bag at your belt. This small success gives you courage, pushing you even deeper into the woods. The trees here are ancient, their bark a rough map of deep grooves and spreading moss. The silence is profound, broken only by the snap of a twig under your foot or the distant caw of a crow. You pause, listening, and become aware of your own breathing, a small, rhythmic sound in the vast quiet. It is in this stillness that you find a small miracle, a low nest woven into the branches of a thorny hawthorn bush. Inside, nestled in a bed of dry grass and feathers, sit 4 pale blue eggs speckled with brown. They are small but perfect. The feeling of their smooth, cool shells in your palm is the feeling of life, a solid promise of a meal.
As you carefully wrap the eggs in a large leaf to protect them, a sudden sound freezes you in place. It is not the sound of a bird or a squirrel. It is a heavy, guttural grunt, followed by the loud crack of a thick branch breaking somewhere to your left. Your blood runs cold. You drop into a crouch behind the thick trunk of an elm, your breath caught in your throat. Your heart hammers against your ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet woods. Peeking around the rough bark, you see it. A great boar, larger than any pig you have ever seen, is rooting in the earth not 50 paces away. Its coarse, dark bristles are matted with mud, and a pair of long, yellowed tusks curve menacingly from its snout. The beast seems not to have noticed you.
It continues to tear at the ground with its powerful snout, searching for roots. You watch, motionless, as it rips a small sapling from the earth with a casual toss of its massive head. The sheer power of the animal is terrifying. You are an intruder in its home, and you know that if it were to catch your scent, you would stand no chance. You press yourself tighter against the tree, trying to make yourself smaller, to disappear into the bark and shadows. The scent of wild animal and damp soil is strong, a raw and intimidating perfume that speaks of a power you cannot challenge. Minutes feel like hours. The boar grunts again, then turns and ambles away, its heavy body crashing through the undergrowth until the sounds of its passage fade into the distance. Only then do you allow yourself to breathe, a long, shuddering exhale that leaves you feeling shaky and weak. The fear drains away slowly, replaced by a profound sense of your own vulnerability. The woods have given you food, but they have also shown you their teeth. You understand now that survival out here is not just about finding things to eat, it is also about not being eaten yourself. The eggs in your bag suddenly feel infinitely more precious, won not just with effort, but with risk.
The journey back is different. You move with a new awareness, your senses on high alert. Every rustle of leaves makes you flinch. Every shadow seems to hide a potential threat. The woods no longer feel like a simple pantry, but a complex world with its own rules and dangers. You do not stray from the path you made, carefully retracing your steps towards the light at the edge of the forest. When you finally step out from under the canopy, the open sky and the warmth on your skin feel like a welcome embrace. The familiar sight of your own small hut, lonely as it is, has never looked so much like a sanctuary. Back inside, with the door barred, you gently unwrap your treasures. The mushrooms and the precious eggs sit on your small wooden table, a tiny hoard that represents a monumental victory. You build up the fire in the hearth, the smell of wood smoke, a comforting presence in the small space. As you cook the mushrooms and eggs together, the simple fare of a survivor, the aroma is richer and more satisfying than any feast you can remember. This meal is more than just food to fill your stomach. It is a testament to your will to live. Learning the hard lessons of this wild, whispering place has become a vital part of your own struggle. A rhythmic thudding, deep and steady, pulls you from a light sleep. It is not the familiar sound of an axe splitting wood, nor the dull thump of a neighbor mending a fence. This sound has a weight to it, a purposeful beat against the damp earth that speaks of something other than simple village work. You push yourself up from your straw pallet, the movement slow and stiff. The quiet that has been your constant companion for weeks is broken, and a knot of unease tightens in your stomach. Peeking through a crack in your hut's wattle-and-daub wall, a mixture of woven sticks and clay, you see the source. A man sits high on a broad-backed horse, the animal's breath pluming in the cool air. The man's cloak is dark, heavy wool, and his boots are thick leather, a world away from the rags that now cover your own feet.
This is the Lord's reeve, the man who manages the estate for the noble you have never seen. His face, shadowed by a low cap, is a mask of grim purpose. He is not looking at you, but past you, his gaze sweeping over the handful of huts that still stand, as if counting them. In his gloved hand, he holds a wooden board with a piece of parchment attached, a quill pen tucked behind his ear. He is making a record, an accounting of what and who the pestilence has left behind. You have not seen him since before the sickness, but his presence now feels heavier, more menacing than a simple visit. He represents an order you thought had dissolved in the silence, a power that has outlasted the fever and the graves. The horse shifts its weight, its shod hoof scraping against a stone, and the sound grates on your nerves. As he approaches your doorway, he does not dismount. From his elevated position, he looks down, his expression unreadable. His gaze flicks over your thin frame, your patched tunic, and then seems to pierce the very walls of your small home, as if he can see every hidden corner. He is assessing everything. You are the only one from this household? His voice is flat, without pity or curiosity. It is the voice of a man doing a task. You give a short, stiff nod, your throat too dry to speak. He makes a mark on his parchment with the quill. The Lord requires a tally of all remaining assets, he continues, his eyes never leaving you. Tools, grain, livestock. What is yours is his, and he must know what he has. The words hang there, a statement of fact as solid and unmovable as the ground beneath you. The question sends a chill through you that has nothing to do with the morning air. Your mind races, a frantic scramble through your meager possessions. There is the worn spade with the splintered handle, the clay pot that leaks, and the small bag of grain you managed to save. But then you think of the other thing, the small victory you won in the whispering woods. Hidden beneath a loose floorstone is a small, tightly woven sack containing the dried mushrooms and edible roots you found on your risky journey deeper among the trees. It is not much, but it is a secret reserve, a shield against the next wave of hunger. It is the direct result of your own courage, found far from the Lord's fields and the reeve's watchful eyes. The thought of giving it up, of having it tallied on his list and possibly taken, feels like a deep violation. You find yourself torn. Part of you, the part that has learned the hard lesson of obedience, knows that lying to this man is a dangerous game. If he were to search the hut and find your hidden store, the punishment would be swift and severe. A public whipping or the confiscation of your only spade would be a sentence of slow death. Honesty, however, offers no comfort. To declare what you have is to risk losing it to a tax or a direct claim from the Lord. A sliver of cautious goodwill from the reeve is a poor trade for an empty stomach. The silence stretches, and the reeve's gaze hardens with impatience. He is a man with no time for a peasant's hesitation. Your life has become a series of gambles, and this one feels the most critical yet. Your thoughts turn to the future.
That small sack of roots is more than a few meals. It is a promise of survival for another week, a small measure of control in a world that has taken everything else. The reeve represents a different kind of survival, one that involves bowing to a power you cannot fight. You must decide which path is the wiser one. Do you protect the small thing you have earned through your own wit and risk, or do you surrender it to a system that sees you only as another asset on a list? The memory of that deep, gnawing hunger from before your discovery in the woods makes the decision for you. That is a feeling you cannot bear to face again so soon.
Looking up at the mounted man, you keep your face as blank as possible, hoping to hide the frantic calculations happening behind your eyes. "There is little left, master," you say, your voice raspy. "A handful of grain, an old spade. The sickness took the rest." You gesture vaguely around the empty yard where your family's chickens once scratched in the dirt. You are careful to keep your eyes downcast, a posture of humble submission that you hope will be more convincing than your words. It is a lie of omission, a careful hiding of the truth. As you speak, you feel a strange mix of terror and defiance. It is the first time you have actively worked against the Lord's authority, and the act feels both foolish and necessary. The reeve stares at you for a long moment, his eyes narrowed. You can feel his suspicion like a physical weight, and you force yourself not to fidget, not to glance towards the loose floor stone inside your hut. Your heart hammers against your ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet morning. Finally, with a small dismissive grunt, he makes another note on his parchment. It seems your performance was enough, or perhaps he simply does not care enough to question you further. There are other huts to visit, other survivors to count. He has no time to waste on one lone peasant who claims to have nothing. The world, for him, is a list of assets and labor, and you are now just a name with very little written next to it. Without another word, he pulls on the horse's reins, turning the animal away from your home. The great beast moves with an easy power you can only dream of possessing. You watch him ride towards your neighbor's hut, his back straight and unforgiving, a symbol of a world that continues to turn regardless of individual suffering. You remain frozen in your doorway until he is gone from sight, only then allowing yourself to draw a deep, shuddering breath. The danger has passed for now, but the encounter leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. You have successfully protected your small treasure, but you have also planted a seed, a secret that you must now guard as carefully as the food itself. Returning inside, the familiar dimness of your hut feels different. It is no longer just a shelter, but a place of secrets. You glance at the floor stone, and the knowledge of what lies beneath is both a comfort and a new source of anxiety. You have survived the plague, you have fought back against starvation, and now you have faced the Lord's power and, in a small way, defied it. This struggle is not just against hunger or sickness anymore. It is against other men. You have felt the crushing weight of a system far older and larger than your own life, and you have chosen to stand, however precariously, in its shadow. The ache of hunger has become a familiar companion, a dull throb beneath your ribs that dictates your every move.
It is this ache that guides you from your small hut, past the silent doorways of your former neighbors, and toward the stone church at the village center. For the first time since the Great Sickness, a handful of people are gathered there, not for prayer, but for something far more immediate. A makeshift market has formed near the Lich Gate, the covered entrance to the churchyard where coffins once rested. Here, the living now trade what little they have, their voices low and cautious, a stark contrast to the boisterous market days you remember. The air, instead of smelling of pies and ale, carries the scent of damp wool and the faint, unsettling sweetness of upturned earth from the new graves nearby. Following the consequence of your foray into the woods, you clutch what you have to offer, a tightly bound bundle of wild herbs. You had found them in a sun-dappled clearing deep among the trees, their pungent, peppery scent a sign of life in a world that felt dead. Now, their sharp fragrance cuts through the other smells, a small token of your resilience. You scan the meager offerings laid out on sacks and flat stones. There are so few people left, and even fewer goods. A man with a face like worn leather has a few wooden bowls he must have spent the lonely weeks carving. Another has a pair of scrawny chickens tied by the leg, their heads nervously twitching. Your eyes, however, are drawn to two possibilities that represent the core of your dilemma. To your left, a woman stands behind a plank resting on two barrels. On it are several salted fish, their skin a dark, leathery brown and crusted with coarse crystals of salt. The strong, briny smell reaches you even from here, and your stomach gives a painful twist of desire. That fish would mean a full belly tonight, and tomorrow, and perhaps the day after. It would be a solid, satisfying meal, the kind of food that makes you feel strong, that quiets the constant gnawing anxiety. The promise of it is immediate and powerful, a relief so profound you can almost taste the salty flesh on your tongue. The thought makes your mouth water, a physical reaction that nearly makes the decision for you. On the other side of the small gathering, a thin man sits on a stump, a burlap sack resting between his feet. The top is open, showing a mound of pale, hard seed grain, barley by the look of it. There is no tempting smell, only the dry, dusty scent of earth and potential. The seeds offer nothing for the hunger you feel right now. They are a promise of future labor, of back-breaking work clearing your small plot of land, of anxious days watching the sky for rain, and of sleepless nights worrying about rot or pests. They are a gamble, a wager placed on a future that is anything but certain. Yet, they also represent a kind of survival that the fish cannot offer, the chance to grow something of your own. This choice is a war fought within you. Your body, weary and starved, screams for the fish. It pleads for the simple, honest satisfaction of a meal, for the energy to get through the next few days without the dizzy spells that sometimes take you. Every instinct honed by weeks of deprivation tells you to take the sure thing, to silence the immediate pain. The memory of true hunger is a powerful master, and it points directly to the salted food. To ignore its command feels like a betrayal of your own survival, a foolish act of denial in the face of a clear and present need. However, a different part of you, the part that has survived this long through caution and foresight, sees beyond tonight's meal.
It is the part of you that remembers your parents working their own strip of land, the satisfaction on their faces as the first green shoots appeared. This part understands that a full belly for 2 days is a short-lived victory if it leads to an empty sack in a month. The seeds are not just food, they are a tool, a foothold in this new, emptier world. With so few people left to work the Lord's vast fields, your own small garden is more vital than ever. The reeve can claim a portion of your crop, but he cannot claim the knowledge you gain by growing it. You find yourself rooted to the spot, your gaze shifting between the woman with her fish and the man with his seeds. The low murmur of the other villagers fades into a distant hum. This is more than a simple trade. It is a decision about the kind of person you will be from now on. Will you live day to day, taking whatever relief you can find? Or will you endure more hardship now for the possibility of a more stable tomorrow? The fish represents the past, the old way of thinking, where the next meal was the only thing that mattered. The seeds, however, represent a future you must build with your own 2 hands, a furrow you must plow yourself. After a long, silent debate, you make your decision. Your feet, feeling heavy, carry you not toward the tantalizing smell of the sea, but toward the dusty promise of the earth. You approach the thin man, who looks up at you with weary eyes. You hold out your bundle of herbs. He inspects them, crushing a leaf between his thumb and forefinger and bringing it to his nose. He gives a slow, considered nod. There is no haggling, no friendly chat. This is a transaction born of pure necessity, a silent acknowledgement of mutual need in a world stripped of pleasantries. An unspoken rule of this new economy is that you trade for what you need to live and waste no breath on anything else.
He scoops a generous portion of seeds into a smaller cloth bag, his hand acting as the only measure needed. You trade your bundle for his bag. The rough weave of the bag feels solid in your hand, its weight surprisingly comforting. As you turn to leave, you catch the scent of the salted fish one last time, a phantom temptation that you must now consciously ignore. The woman has already found another person to trade with, and the brief opportunity is gone forever. You feel a pang of regret, a physical ache for the meal you sacrificed, but it is quickly replaced by the gravity of what you now hold. Walking back toward your hut, the path seems different. The weight of the seeds is a burden, but a hopeful one. Each small, hard grain represents a choice you have made, a commitment to a future that will demand everything from you. You think of the small plot of land behind your home, overgrown with weeds. You picture the hard work of turning the soil, of planting each seed with care, of protecting the tender shoots from rabbits and birds. It is an exhausting vision, yet it is a vision of life, of creation in a landscape recently dominated by death and decay. This small sack feels like the first real thing you have owned since the world fell apart. It is not something you found, but something you earned through your knowledge of the woods. It is not something you were given, but something you chose over immediate comfort. This distinction matters deeply.
It is a small act of defiance against the despair that has settled over the land like a persistent fog. The reeve and his lord may own the ground beneath your feet, but they do not own the future you are now determined to cultivate within it.
You reach your hut and carefully place the sack of seeds in the driest corner, away from any potential leaks in the roof. You run your hand over the rough cloth one last time, feeling the small, round shapes within. The sun is now low, and long shadows stretch across the empty village. The day is ending. Your stomach is still empty, but your hands hold the promise of a harvest. The memory of the choice at the barter stone now rests in your mind, a seed of hope planted in the soil of a hard-won tomorrow. The world has shrunk to the sound of water. For days, a steady, cold rain has fallen from a sky the color of a slate roof, turning the village paths into streams of mud and the fields into shallow lakes. Inside your hut, the drumming on the thatched roof is a constant, low roar that muffles all other sounds, isolating you in a world of gray light and dampness. At first, the sound was a comfort, a sign of nature's rhythm continuing even after so much of human life had stopped. But that comfort has long since curdled into a nagging worry. The relentless noise seems to press down, making the small space of your home feel even smaller, like a cage slowly filling with water. This worry has now found a voice. It is a single, maddening sound that cuts through the general roar. Plink, plink, plink. Near the corner where you sleep, a dark, steady drip falls from the smoke-stained thatch onto the packed earth floor. Each drop lands with a sound that is both tiny and enormous, a constant reminder of the weakness in your shelter. A small, dark puddle has formed, and with every passing hour, its edges creep outward, a slow, patient stain on the floor of your life. You find yourself listening for it, anticipating each drop, the rhythm becoming a torment that drills into your thoughts and frays your nerves.
A deep chill has settled into your bones, one that has nothing to do with the wind outside. It is a damp cold that clings to your woolen tunic and seems to rise from the very earth beneath you. You pull your thin blanket tighter around your shoulders, but the fabric itself feels clammy, holding the moisture of the hut. Your muscles ache with a dull, persistent throb, and each breath you draw feels heavy and cool in your lungs. You move stiffly, conserving every motion, because the cold saps your strength, making even the simple act of standing up feel like a significant effort. The world outside is a torrent of misery, but the world inside is becoming a quiet swamp of its own. Your gaze drifts to the one thing that represents a future beyond this miserable rain, the small, tightly bound sack of seed grain. It rests on a slightly raised pile of stones in the driest corner, a treasure you chose over the immediate satisfaction of salted fish.
The memory of that choice, of your gnawing hunger as you walked away from the barter stone, is still sharp. Now, the creeping dampness from the leak threatens to ruin that painful sacrifice. If moisture gets into that sack, the seeds will rot, turning your hope for a spring harvest into a foul-smelling mush. That thought is colder than any rain, a fear that cuts deeper than the chill in your joints. Part of you argues for patience, for the simple logic of survival. To go out into that downpour would be madness. The wind is sharp, and the rain is a drenching, icy torrent. You could slip in the mud, fall from the low roof, and injure yourself with no one to help. It is far wiser, this voice of caution whispers, to huddle inside, to save what little energy you have. You could move the grain, block the drip with your one wooden bowl, and simply endure. The storm must break eventually. Conserving your warmth and strength feels like the most practical path, a surrender to the inevitable in the hope of outlasting it.
However, as you sit there, listening to the steady plink, plink of the falling water, the logic of endurance begins to feel like a slow defeat. The puddle on the floor is a growing symbol of your powerlessness. You imagine the damp seeping through the woven rushes of your sleeping pallet, the smell of mildew beginning to rise, the chill becoming a sickness in your chest. Waiting for the storm to pass means letting the damage worsen, gambling that the leak won't grow into a steady trickle. It feels like watching a wound fester, hoping it will heal on its own, while knowing deep down that it will only get worse without action. The alternative is a brutal one. The thought of climbing onto the roof in this weather makes you physically recoil. You can already feel the slick, slimy texture of the wet thatch under your hands, the way the mud will suck at your feet, trying to pull you down. The wind will tear at your cloak and drive the icy rain into your face, stinging your eyes and stealing the breath from your lungs. It would be a miserable, exhausting struggle against the elements, a fight that will leave you soaked to the skin and shivering uncontrollably, using up precious warmth and energy you may not be able to easily replace. Yet, the idea of action holds a powerful appeal. To face the storm head-on, to push back against the decay, feels like a declaration that you are not simply a victim of this world. It would be your will against the rains. Stopping that leak would not just save your grain, it would be a victory, however small. It would mean making your shelter whole again, reclaiming your small space from the encroaching misery. The satisfaction of a quiet, dry hut, a place of true refuge, seems like a prize worth any amount of temporary suffering. The memory of the reeve's calculating eyes, assessing your worth, fuels this feeling. A failed crop would leave you with nothing to offer, nothing to justify your existence on this land. The internal debate sharpens. The gnawing misery of staying in the cold, damp hut feels like a slow drowning. The thought of working in the punishing downpour, by contrast, feels like a fierce struggle to breathe. One is a passive suffering, the other an active one. You look again at the seed sack, at the future it holds, a future you fought for at the barter stone and protected in the woods. You cannot let it be washed away by inaction.
The exhaustion of the work will be temporary, but the security it brings will last through the winter. The decision settles not as a choice, but as a necessity. Steeling yourself, you rise. The movement is stiff, your joints protesting the cold. You pull on your worn cloak, the damp wool heavy on your shoulders, and push open the door. A gust of wind shoves it back at you, carrying a spray of cold water that hits your face like a handful of needles. You lean into it, stepping out into a world of churning gray. The mud is thick and slick, instantly covering your bare feet with its cold grasp. The roar of the rain is deafening out here, a physical force that seems to press you down toward the sodden earth. You squint against the deluge, your eyes fixed on the sloping roof of your small home. The climb is a clumsy, desperate scramble. There are no handholds, only the slippery, bundled thatch that gives way under your fingers. Mud slicks your hands and feet, making every movement a risk. Twice your foot slides, and you have to flatten yourself against the roof to keep from falling back into the mire below. The wind whips your cloak around you, a cold, wet sheet that threatens to pull you off balance. Once you are finally crouched on the low peak, you feel completely exposed, a small, shivering figure fighting a battle against the sky itself. Your fingers, numb with cold, fumble with the sodden bundles of straw, trying to find the source of the leak.
You work with a frantic energy, pulling apart the rotten sections and reweaving them with healthier stalks you pull from the underside of the eaves. The process is slow and awkward. The wet straw is heavy and uncooperative. After what feels like an eternity, you manage to create a thicker, more tightly woven patch over the weak spot. Sliding back down to the ground, you land with a soft squelch in the mud, every muscle in your body screaming in protest. You are covered in filth, soaked through to your skin, and a violent shiver begins to rack your entire frame. Stumbling back inside, you push the door shut, and the world is suddenly, blessedly, quiet. The dripping has stopped. A profound silence fills the hut, broken only by the sound of your own chattering teeth and the distant drumming of the rain. You stand for a moment in the center of the small space, water pooling around your feet, feeling the deep, trembling exhaustion in your limbs. But the air no longer feels hostile. The corner where you sleep is now just a corner, not a source of constant dread. You have paid a steep price in warmth and energy, and you can already feel a tightness in your chest that might become a cough. But as you look at the undisturbed sack of seeds, safe and dry, you know you have made the right choice. You have defended your future. You strip off the freezing, mud-caked clothes and wrap yourself in your driest wool blanket, huddling near the cold hearth where a fire might one day burn again. The shivering continues, but a sense of profound accomplishment settles over you. You look at the dark, damp patch on the floor, no longer growing, and see it not as a failure of your home, but as a mark of your own resilience. You did not simply endure the storm. You faced it and won. You feel the strength of this small, hard-won sanctuary in the very core of your being.
The damp earth feels cool against your fingertips. You are on your knees beside the small plot of turned soil behind your hut, the place where you gambled your future on a handful of seeds. Tiny green shoots, no bigger than your thumbnail, are pushing their way toward the light. Each one is a small miracle, a fragile promise of food for the empty months ahead. You gently crumble a clod of dirt, your movements slow and deliberate, a strange sense of hope warming you from the inside. This small patch of ground is everything. The effort of mending your roof in the drenching rain left an ache deep in your back, a constant reminder of how little energy you have to spare. But seeing these signs of life makes the exhaustion feel worthwhile. This patch of earth is the only thing in this quiet, broken world that feels truly yours. This quiet focus is shattered by a sound that makes you freeze. It's the rhythmic beat of hooves on the path, a sound of authority in a world that has had little of it for months. You rise slowly, wiping your hands on your worn tunic, and turn to see the Lord's reeve astride his horse. He is the manager of the estate, a man whose face is a map of grim duty. He stops just beyond your plot, his horse snorting impatiently, its large form casting a long shadow that falls directly over your precious seedlings. The reeve does not dismount. From his elevated position, he looks down not just at you, but at the entire landscape of survival you are trying to build. His gaze is flat and assessing, like a carpenter measuring wood before the cut. He consults a piece of parchment, his lips moving silently.
Following this silent review, he finally speaks, his voice carrying easily in the still air, devoid of warmth or sympathy. He announces that the Lord's demesne, the land worked directly for the manor, is choked with weeds and stones after months of neglect. With so few hands left, the old customs must be enforced with renewed vigor. He declares a week of boon work, the unpaid labor every tenant owes the Lord. Starting tomorrow, at first light, all able-bodied survivors are to report to the great fields by the river to begin clearing them for planting. It is not a request. It is a statement of fact, an order as solid and unchangeable as the stones you are now being commanded to clear from his master's land. His words land like stones in your stomach. Your gaze drifts from his impassive face back to your own small field. A week, an entire week away from this place, away from these vulnerable green shoots that need constant protection from birds and the fast-growing weeds you can already see sprouting between them. A week is an eternity for a seedling. The ache in your back throbs in rhythm with a rising panic. To obey the reeve is to neglect your own survival, to turn your back on the one chance you have to feed yourself. It feels like abandoning a child in the wilderness. The thought of your future withering in the ground while you toil for the Lord sends a hot spike of anger through you. On the other hand, the reeve is still there on his horse, watching you, waiting for your acknowledgement. His hand rests near the hilt of a short sword at his belt, a clear symbol of the power he represents. To refuse his order is unthinkable. It is not just defiance,
It is an open challenge to the entire structure of the world as you know it. Punishment would be swift and certain. A fine you could never pay, the confiscation of your only pot or your best tool, or perhaps even being cast out, left to wander the roads with nothing. That path leads to a quick and certain starvation, a much faster end than the slow one you fear from a neglected crop. Defiance feels like suicide, but compliance feels like a slower, more bitter kind of defeat.
You are trapped between these two impossible choices. Fear of authority, a lesson beaten into you since birth, wars with the desperate, primal need to protect your food source. His cold, patient stare feels heavier than a physical weight. He is not just a man on a horse. He is the embodiment of a system that survived the plague, a system that still demands its due from the living. The silence stretches, and you realize he is waiting for you to nod, to signal your submission. The anger in your gut cools into a hard, cold knot of resignation. You cannot fight him. You cannot win. With a movement that feels like it takes all your strength, you give a short, stiff nod. The Reeve's expression does not change, but he gives a slight tug on the reins. Your compliance has been registered. The next morning, you walk towards the Lord's fields with the other survivors. There are not many of you, a scattered line of bent backs and tired faces moving through the morning mist. The air is cool, and the dew on the grass soaks the hem of your tunic, a damp chill that seems to creep into your bones. No one speaks. The only sounds are the shuffle of feet and the distant call of a cuckoo. You carry a sharpened digging stick, a poor tool for the work ahead, but it is all you have. As you arrive, you see the vast expanse of the domain fields. They stretch out, overgrown and wild, a stark contrast to your own tiny, carefully tended plot. The Reeve is already there, still on his horse, a silent overseer on a small rise. He simply points, and the work begins. The labor is grueling and monotonous. You are tasked with clearing a section riddled with heavy stones and thick-rooted thistles. You use your stick to pry at the larger rocks, your muscles straining with the effort. Your hands, already calloused, soon feel raw and tender. For the smaller stones, you bend and gather them into your tunic, carrying them to a growing pile at the edge of the field. Each time you straighten up, you instinctively glance in the direction of your hut, a useless gesture, as it is hidden from view. Still, the thought of it, of your seedlings alone in the ground, is a constant, nagging worry at the back of your mind. A sharp sting on your arm brings you back to the present. You have brushed against a patch of nettles, and an angry red rash begins to form. Throughout the long day, you and the others work under the Reeve's watchful eye. He says little, occasionally riding along the line of workers to ensure no one is slacking. The sun climbs higher, and you feel the warmth on your neck and shoulders. You pause often to wipe sweat from your brow with the back of a dirty hand, your breathing growing more labored. You share a water skin with the man working next to you, a fellow survivor you recognize but have never spoken to beyond a simple greeting. The water is lukewarm and tastes of leather, but it is a small moment of shared relief. No words are exchanged, only a nod of thanks. In this shared, forced labor, a silent understanding forms, a community of resentment bound together by the reeve's command. When the light finally begins to fade, the reeve gives a sharp whistle, signaling the end of the day's work. The sound is a release. Every muscle in your body screams in protest as you straighten your back one last time. The walk home is a slow, shuffling affair. The exhaustion is so deep, it feels as though it has settled into your bones. As your hut comes into view, you force your legs to move faster, a knot of anxiety tightening in your chest. You rush to your plot of land, and your heart sinks. Even in one day, the change is noticeable. Several of the most delicate shoots have been pecked away by birds, and a fine carpet of new weeds is already taking advantage of the untended soil. Looking at the damage, a feeling of utter powerlessness washes over you. You have spent the entire day laboring to enrich a Lord you will never see, while your own small hope for the future has been diminished. The injustice of it is a bitter taste in your mouth, as sharp and unpleasant as the nettle stings on your arm. You are too tired to do anything about it now. You can only stand there, watching the last of the light disappear, knowing that tomorrow you must return to the Lord's fields and do it all again. The weeds in your plot seem to mock you in the gathering gloom.
That night, sleep offers little rest. You dream of endless fields of stone and thistle, your hands raw and bleeding. You awaken before dawn to the familiar ache in your back and a new soreness in your arms and legs. Forcing yourself to rise, you chew on a small piece of salted fish from the trade you made, the salty tang doing little to lift your spirits. You know it will not be enough to sustain you through another day of hard labor. Before leaving, you spend a few precious moments frantically pulling the most aggressive weeds from your plot, your movements rushed and desperate. It feels like trying to empty the sea with a spoon. You are simply trading one master, the Lord, for another, the relentless, uncaring hunger of the land itself. Your forced labor has bound you to this unyielding cycle of work and worry. The work on the Lord's land left your own small plot of earth green with weeds, not seedlings. This reality pushes you from the familiar furrows of your garden into the deeper quiet of the woods. Hunger is a constant companion, a dull ache that sharpens your senses. You move slowly, your eyes scanning the ground for the telltale shape of edible roots or the subtle blush of late berries missed by others. Each step is deliberate, conserving the energy you have. That persistent cough, a damp ghost from the leaking roof you endured weeks ago, returns with every deep breath, a reminder that your body is still mending itself in a world that offers little rest. This forces you to pause more often than you would like, leaning against the rough bark of an oak to catch your breath. Because of this intense focus, the sharp crack of a twig underfoot nearby makes you freeze instantly. It is not your sound. Your heart gives a hard thump against your ribs as you crouch behind a thicket of holly, peering through the dark, glossy leaves.
For a long moment, there is only the sound of your own breathing and the whisper of wind through the high branches. You remain perfectly still, a hunter who has suddenly become the hunted. Animals in these woods are shy, and the few other villagers who venture this far are known to you. A strange sound means a change in the day's pattern, and any change in these fragile times is a potential threat.
This sudden tension breaks when a low groan follows the sound. It is human. Cautiously, you part the leaves and see them. Sprawled at the base of a large beech tree is a person, a stranger, half hidden by the ferns. They are thin, their clothes little more than worn rags, and their face is pale with a sheen of sweat you recognize all too well. They are conscious, their eyes open and fixed on nothing. Your first instinct is to back away silently, to melt back into the woods and forget what you saw. The memory of the sickness is a physical thing, a cold dread that tightens your stomach and makes the hairs on your arms stand up. Every instinct screams at you to flee. The stranger's head turns slowly, as if sensing your presence. Their voice is a dry rasp, barely louder than the rustling leaves. "Wait," they plead, not with strength, but with the last of their will. They gesture with a trembling hand, not to themselves, but to an object on the ground beside them. It is a pot, not a fragile clay one that might crack with the first fire, but a heavy, black iron pot with a sturdy handle and 3 short legs. It is a treasure, a tool of immense value you have only seen in the Reeves' kitchen. "Food," the stranger whispers, their eyes finding yours. "One day of food, a place by your fire until morning, and it is yours." Your mind struggles to grasp the offer, an iron pot. With such a thing, you could make proper soup, boil tough roots until they were soft, and render the fat from a rabbit to be saved for the lean months. You could have hot water to wash with, a comfort you have not known in a very long time. It would be more than a tool. It would be a foundation upon which a real life could be rebuilt, a piece of permanence in a world where everything has fallen apart. The thought of it is so powerful, it almost makes you dizzy. It is a promise of warmth, of full meals, of a security that feels like a distant dream.
But then your gaze shifts back to the stranger's face, to the fever-bright eyes and the pale, damp skin. The fear returns, cold and sharp. Letting a sick person near your home into the small space you have kept safe feels like madness. It is an invitation for the shadow to return, the same shadow that took your family, your neighbors, and your world. Every lesson you have learned since the great quiet fell has been about caution, about distance, about protecting the single fragile life you have left. To risk it all for a cooking pot, no matter how valuable, seems like a fool's bargain. The images of the plague wagons and the silent huts flash through your mind, a potent warning against this stranger. You find yourself pinned in place, torn between these 2 powerful currents. Your fear is a living thing, a cold hand on your shoulder, urging you to run and never look back. It tells you that survival is about saying no, about building walls, about trusting nothing and no one.
Yet the sight of that sturdy iron pot holds you fast. It represents a different kind of survival, one where you do more than simply endure. It is a chance to climb up from the dirt, to have a tool that could last a lifetime. Is the reward worth a terror that feels so raw and recent? The silence of the woods stretches as you wrestle with the choice. Looking at the stranger again, you see not just the disease, but the desperation that mirrors your own. They are not asking for charity. They are offering a trade, the last valuable thing they possess for a simple chance at seeing another sunrise. They are another soul caught in the wreckage of the world, trying to find a way through. In their sunken eyes, you see a reflection of your own struggle, the same gnawing hunger and the same profound loneliness. This is not just a calculation of risk, but a question of what kind of person you are now in the aftermath of everything.
A breath you did not realize you were holding escapes your lips. The decision settles not with a clear thought, but with a quiet sense of inevitability. You cannot turn away. Taking a cautious step out from behind the holly, you give a slow nod. The stranger's shoulders slump with a relief so profound it seems to drain the last of their strength. You move forward, keeping a careful distance, and place the small bundle of roots you had gathered on the ground near them. It is not much, but it is a day's worth, as promised. Your heart hammers against your ribs, each beat a question of whether you have just secured your future or thrown it away. The journey back to your hut is agonizingly slow. The stranger leans heavily on a branch, shuffling through the undergrowth while you carry the pot. Its weight is surprising, a solid, tangible burden that feels both wonderful and terrifying in your arms. Every cough from them makes you flinch, and you find yourself holding your breath as you help them over a fallen log. By the time you reach your small dwelling, the last of the afternoon light is fading. You guide them to a corner far from your sleeping pallet, a silent agreement to maintain what little distance you can within the small hut. They collapse onto the earthen floor, already slipping into a feverish sleep. The iron pot sits near your hearth, dark and solid in the dim light. You run a hand over its cool, smooth surface, the metal unfamiliar and full of promise. It is yours. You paid a price for it, a terrible risk that you will not know the full cost of for days. The weight of this choice, like the iron in your hands, will remain with you long after the stranger is gone. The damp earth, cool against your kneeling knees, offers up a scent of deep, clean life. For weeks, this small plot of land has been nothing but dark soil and a desperate hope. Now, impossibly, dozens of tiny green shoots push their way toward the light. These are not the wild weeds you have been pulling, but the ordered, fragile lines of the seeds you traded for, a future you can almost taste. Each leaf seems like a tiny miracle, a promise that the world has not completely forgotten how to grow.
A warmth spreads through your chest that has nothing to do with the morning sun climbing over the trees. It is a feeling you had thought lost forever. The simple satisfaction of having planted something and seen it live. This small patch of green is yours, earned through hunger and hard choices. This feeling of fragile triumph, however, does not last long. As you move along the rows, your fingers gently clearing away a stray pebble, you see it. A small, perfect hoofprint pressed into the soft dirt. Then another and another. Your eyes follow the trail, a path of tiny disruptions cutting right through your nascent crop. Rabbits. The tracks are everywhere, circling the plot like a besieging army. A cold knot forms in your stomach, replacing the warmth from moments before. You see a shoot nearby that has been nibbled down to a nub, its promise stolen before it could even truly begin. The sheer injustice of it makes your hands clench into fists, the dirt grinding under your nails. You have survived the plague, the emptiness, the hunger, and now a new threat has come, not with a scythe or a fever, but with silent, nibbling teeth in the night. Standing up, you survey the scene, your mind racing. The plot is vulnerable, an open invitation in a world that is always hungry. The challenge is clear. You must protect this food. Yet as you stare at the tracks leading back towards the woods, another thought takes root. The rabbits are not just a danger. They are also meat. They are fur that could be patched into your worn clothes or traded for something you need. This realization splits your thoughts into two distinct paths, each demanding your limited time and dwindling energy. One path is one of defense, of building a wall between your future and the creatures that would devour it. The other is a path of attack, of turning the threat into a resource.
The first path feels safer, more certain. You could spend the next few days gathering supple branches of hazel and willow, driving sharpened stakes into the ground, and weaving a tight wattle fence around the entire plot. It would be back-breaking work, your muscles protesting every bent branch and hammered post. This method would create a barrier, a clear line that says, "This is mine." A fence is a purely defensive act, a declaration of ownership that protects what you have without seeking more. It offers no food for your belly tonight, but it might ensure there is food for the winter. The thought is comforting, a solid, tangible solution to a frustrating problem. It appeals to the cautious part of you that has learned, the hard way, that holding on to what you have is a victory in itself. On the other hand, the second path whispers of opportunity. Instead of building a wall, you could use those same hours to craft snares. You remember watching an old hunter in the village, his hands moving with practiced speed as he twisted cordage from nettle fibers and fashioned clever loops designed to tighten with a panicked pull. Setting snares is a quieter, more cunning art. It involves finding their runs, the subtle paths they use through the undergrowth, and setting your traps with care. This approach turns the problem into the solution. The very creatures threatening your crop would instead end up in your cooking pot, the one you bargained for with your own safety. This path is a gamble. Snares can fail, be discovered by others, or catch nothing at all while the rabbits continue to feast.
Yet the potential reward of a full stomach and a warm pelt is a powerful lure for a body that still remembers the deep ache of starvation.
You find yourself torn, standing in the middle of your small field, the evidence of your dilemma printed in the soil all around you. To build the fence is to focus entirely on protecting the future harvest, a choice of patient preservation. To set the snares is to risk a portion of that future for the immediate gain of meat and fur, a choice of aggressive opportunism. The memory of the risks you have already taken, the long walk to the stream, the choice to share your grain, the bargain for the pot, weighs on your mind. Each decision has shaped the survivor you are becoming. The sun climbs higher, and you can feel its warmth on your back, a reminder that the day is wasting. You must choose. After a long moment, a decision settles in your gut, firm and clear. You turn away from the plot and walk towards the woods, your purpose now singular. You will turn the hunters into the hunted. Your first task is to make the cord. You find a thick patch of stinging nettles near the edge of the woods, and, using a thick leaf to protect your hand, begin stripping the stalks. The sting is a familiar annoyance, a small price to pay for the strong fibers within. You spend hours scraping the outer layer away, leaving behind the tough inner strands, which you twist together, rolling them against your thigh until they form a surprisingly strong cord. It is slow, methodical work, and as your hands move, your mind focuses on the mechanics of the trap. You need a trigger, a loop, and a source of power. For that, you find a young, springy sapling near a rabbit run you identified earlier, a place where the grass is beaten down into a narrow path. With your knife, you carve a small notch into a stake you hammer into the ground, and another into a small trigger stick. The design is simple but ingenious. A loop of your new cord is placed over the rabbit run, tied to the bent-over sapling. The other end of the line is held in place by the delicate tension of the trigger stick resting in the notch of the stake. When a rabbit passes through the loop and nudges the trigger, the stick will slip, releasing the sapling. The tree will then snap upright, pulling the loop tight and hoisting the animal into the air, killing it quickly. As you set the first snare, carefully arranging the loop and camouflaging it with a few leaves, you feel a surge of fierce focus. This is not just about food, it is about outsmarting the world. You spend the rest of the day making and setting more snares, moving silently along the edge of the woods that border your field. Each one is a small monument to your decision. You know that while you are doing this, more of your precious shoots are likely being eaten. You are sacrificing a part of your crop, accepting a certain amount of loss in the hope of a greater gain. It is a terrifying calculation, one that a year ago you would never have been able to make. But the world is different now, and so are you. The need for protein, for the deep, strengthening energy that only meat can provide, overrides the more cautious instinct to simply build a wall. You are no longer just a farmer, you are a hunter, taking your survival directly into your own hands. As dusk begins to settle, casting long, cool shadows across the fields, you stand back and look at your work. The snares are nearly invisible,
silent and waiting. You have done all you can. Now you must wait for the night and for the creatures that move within it. You return to your hut, the scent of crushed nettles still on your hands. Inside, the heavy iron pot sits cold by the hearth, a silent promise of what could be. You eat a small portion of dried herbs and the last of the salted fish, the meal doing little to quiet the hopeful anxiety in your gut. Sleep does not come easily. Every rustle of leaves outside, every snap of a twig sends a jolt through you. You are listening for the sound of a triggered snare, the muffled thump that means success.
The first light of dawn finds you already awake, your body thrumming with anticipation. You move quickly from your hut, your feet damp from the dew on the grass, and make your way to the woods. The first snare is empty, the trigger untouched. The second is the same. A sliver of doubt enters your mind. Perhaps you chose wrong. Perhaps you should have built the fence. Then, as you approach the third snare, you see it. The sapling is no longer bent to the ground, but stands straight and tall, its branches quivering slightly. And there, suspended in the morning air, is a large rabbit caught fast in your nettle fiber cord. A wave of relief so powerful it almost brings you to your knees, washes over you. It worked. Your gamble paid off. You have not only protected your future, but you have also secured your present. You have become the provider of your own small world. The seasons are turning once more. You notice it not in the turning of a page in a book, for you have never seen one, but in the way the morning mist clings longer to the low-lying fields. The sun's warmth on your back as you work is a gentle comfort now, not a heavy burden that forces you to seek shade. The small plot of land you tended so fiercely has given up its meager bounty, and what little you managed to harvest is stored away. If you chose to set snares for the rabbits that once threatened your crop, the smell of wood smoke and roasting meat is a more frequent companion in your small hut, and the soft pelts are a welcome barrier against the damp earth where you sleep. This small measure of stability feels both precious and fragile, a thin wall against a world that has already taken so much.
This fragile peace is broken by the arrival of a stranger. He is not a threat, merely a wanderer moving between the half-empty villages, his face mapped with dust and weariness. He moves with a slow, deliberate gait, as if measuring every step against the energy it will cost him. You share a little of your water, and in return, he shares news from the road. He speaks in a low voice, his words meant only for you and the few others who gather near the old church stone. He tells of men, their homes and families lost to the sickness, who now travel in small bands. They are called the broken men, he says, for they have nothing left to lose. They take what they need, moving through the countryside like a hungry shadow. The traveler's words linger long after he is gone, unsettling the quiet rhythm of your days. The story feels close, a tangible threat to the small life you have clawed back from the edge of nothing. That evening, as you bank the fire in your hut, a familiar shape appears at your doorway. It is your neighbor, the one to whom you gave that first difficult share of grain so long ago. They do not speak at first,
merely looking out towards the dark line of the woods. The memory of that shared meal hangs between you, a silent testament to a bond forged in desperation. They finally turn to you, their face etched with the same worry you feel twisting in your own gut. They suggest that one person cannot stay awake all night, every night, not forever. They propose a shared watch, a pact to guard each other's homes through the long, dark hours. You find yourself torn. Part of you, the part that survived by looking only to your own needs, recoils from the idea. Trust is a currency you no longer possess in abundance. Relying on another person means accepting their weaknesses, their mistakes. What if they fall asleep? What if their presence draws the very trouble you hope to avoid? Yet the alternative is a lonely, exhausting vigil. The thought of sitting alone in the darkness, listening for every snapped twig, starting at every hoot of an owl, feels like a different kind of defeat. Your body already aches from the endless labor of the fields and the forest. You look at your neighbor's face, hollowed by the same hardships you have endured, and you remember their unspoken plea for food. You helped them then. A deeper instinct, a flicker of the old world that existed before the silence, tells you that standing alone is the surest way to fall. You decide to trust. You agree to the watch.
The pact is sealed with a nod. There are no grand promises, only a quiet understanding of mutual need. You agree on a signal, a soft scraping sound on the wooden door, and your neighbor takes the first turn. You retreat into your hut, securing the simple leather flap over the doorway. Sleep does not come easily. Lying on your straw pallet, you listen to the sounds of the night, trying to distinguish the familiar from the threatening. Is that the wind or a footstep? Is that an animal or a whisper? It is a strange and unsettling feeling to place your safety in the hands of another. You are not used to relying on anyone but yourself. The silence from outside is both a comfort and a source of anxiety, proof that your neighbor is either keeping a good watch or has already met with trouble. Just as a light, uneasy sleep begins to take hold, you hear the signal, a faint scratching at the door. You are on your feet in an instant, your heart thumping against your ribs. Pushing aside the flap, you step out into the cold night. The world is transformed. A sliver of moon hangs in the sky, casting long, distorted shadows that seem to move of their own accord. The air is crisp, and you feel a chill creep through your tunic, raising bumps on your arms. Your neighbor gives you a weary nod and slips away into their own hut, their form swallowed by the darkness. Now it is your turn. You are the guardian, the protector of this tiny, two-hut corner of the world. You begin a slow, circular path between your home and your neighbor's. In your hand, you clutch a heavy piece of wood, its weight a small and inadequate comfort. Your senses are heightened, straining to catch any sign of danger. Your eyes scan the dark edge of the forest, a solid wall of blackness that could hide anything. You listen to the chirping of crickets and the distant cry of a night bird, trying to hear a human sound beneath them. The silence feels different now that you are the one responsible for breaking it. It is an active, watchful quiet, filled with your own steady breathing and the soft crunch of your feet on the damp earth. As you keep your solitary watch,
A strange thought occurs to you. These broken men, the ones you fear, are not so different from you. They too have seen their world crumble. They too have known a hunger that scrapes the inside of your stomach raw. What separates you from them? A small plot of land? A handful of stored grain? A neighbor willing to share the darkness? The line feels thin, almost invisible in the pale moonlight. It is a sobering thought, one that makes the fear in your chest feel less like a sharp point and more like a heavy, dull ache of understanding. The blackness of the sky begins to soften, shifting to a deep, bruised purple in the east. The change is slow, almost imperceptible at first, but it brings with it the first tentative calls of morning birds. A wave of relief washes over you, so potent it almost makes your knees buckle. You have made it through the night. The tension that has held your shoulders in a tight grip begins to ease. As the world slowly fills with gray light, your neighbor emerges from their hut. You exchange a look, one of exhaustion, but also of shared success. The pact held. You were not alone. Returning to the relative warmth of your hut, you feel the night's chill deep in your bones. The small space feels safer now, a sanctuary you actively protected. The fear of the raiders has not vanished. You know it will return with the setting sun. This is your life now, a cycle of work and watchfulness, of daylight labor and nighttime vigilance. But as you build up the fire, coaxing a small flame from the embers, a new feeling settles within you. It is not hope, not yet, but something close to it. It is the quiet strength that comes from knowing you do not have to face the long darkness by yourself.
You carry the memory of that shared vigil and the weight of that newfound trust with you as the morning begins its slow, quiet arrival. The sounds of the waking village, sparse as they are, feel less like a reminder of what was lost and more like the beginning of what you might, together, rebuild. This small alliance, born from fear, has become a fragile foundation. You know it is a foundation you will have to defend night after night. But for the first time since the silence fell, it feels like you are building on something more than just your own survival. It feels like you are building on a shared future. The dry stalks of your meager grain crop whisper against your hands as you work. Each head of barley you cut represents a small victory against the hunger of the past months. The sun warms your shoulders, a pleasant feeling after the long days of toil, and you pause to straighten your back, surveying the small piles you have managed to gather. It is not a bounty, not like the harvests you remember from before the quiet came, but it is something. It is enough. The scent of cut straw and dusty earth rises from the ground, a smell of completion and hope. If you made a pact with your neighbor, you see them working on their own small plot nearby, a silent companionship in the rhythm of the harvest. This peaceful rhythm is broken by a familiar sound, the steady beat of a horse's hooves on the hard-packed earth of the path. You do not need to look up to know who it is. The Lord's reeve, the manager of the estate, rides as if the ground itself owes him respect. He brings his horse to a stop at the edge of your plot, the animal snorting and stamping afoot, impatient. The reeve does not dismount immediately. Instead, he simply sits in his leather saddle, looking down at you and your piles of grain, his face unreadable. The shadow of the horse and rider falls over your work, and a coolness spreads across your skin that has nothing to do with the autumn air. After a long moment, he swings his leg over and lands with a soft thud of boots on the soil. He walks through your harvest without care, kicking a loose turnip aside as he inspects the piles. He carries a small, smooth piece of wood in one hand. This is a tally stick, a way of recording debts and payments. He will mark it with notches and then split it in two, one half for his records and one for you, a wooden proof of what is owed. It is a system older than memory, meant to ensure fairness. Yet, as he looks from the grain to you, you feel that fairness is not his primary concern today. Your previous dealings with this man flicker through your mind. If you were honest with him when he first took account of the village survivors, you feel a small, fragile hope that he might be just. If you concealed a tool or some grain, a knot of fear tightens in your stomach, a worry that today is the day your deception is uncovered. He says nothing, merely gesturing with his chin towards the piles. "The Lord's portion," he states, his voice flat and final. He then uses the toe of his boot to draw a line in the dirt, separating one large pile from the three smaller ones you had carefully made. The pile he has claimed for the manor is easily half of your entire harvest. A hot surge of anger rushes up from your belly, so strong it makes your hands tremble. Half? The custom was a quarter, or perhaps a third in a lean year. But half is not custom, it is theft. Every drop of sweat on your brow, every ache in your back, every moment you spent chasing rabbits away from these fragile shoots, it all feels meaningless in the face of his casual claim. The food he is taking is not just grain, it is days of life in the deep of winter. It is the difference between scraping by and starving. The words to protest form in your throat, sharp and bitter. But then, a different feeling, cold and heavy, settles over the fire in your gut. Fear. You remember the reeve's power, the authority of the Lord behind him. To challenge him is to challenge the entire order of the world. He holds the power to fine you, to seize your tools, or to have you thrown off this small patch of land you have clung to so desperately. He is the law here. Arguing might save you a bushel of grain today, but it could cost you everything tomorrow. He would not forget the insult. He would watch you, waiting for any small mistake, any reason to crush you. You are torn. One part of you, the part that has fought and scraped and refused to die, screams to speak up. It is a matter of justice, of what is right. This part of you sees the faces of your family, the ones who did not survive, and feels you owe it to them to not be cheated. The other part, the survivor, sees the long, cold months ahead. This part knows that pride is a luxury you cannot afford. It urges you to swallow the injustice, to endure this theft as you have endured so much else. Survival is not about being right.
It is about being present for the next sunrise. The reeve waits, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. He has seen this hesitation before in the faces of others. He is patient. Your gaze might flicker to your neighbor who has paused their own work to watch. If you are allies, you see your own fear and anger reflected in their eyes. You are not alone in this, but you are both equally powerless. If you have kept to yourself, the isolation feels immense, a vast and empty field in which you stand as a solitary target. The silence stretches, filled only by the rustle of the wind through the remaining stalks.
After a moment that feels like a lifetime, you make your choice. You either lift your chin, open your mouth, and speak the dangerous words of protest, pointing out the injustice of the share he has claimed, or you give a slow, deliberate nod. You bend down, your joints cracking in complaint, and begin to tie the sacks for the Lord's portion, your silence screaming louder than any words you could have spoken. Your hands work mechanically, your mind a storm of quiet fury and cold calculation. Each knot you tie feels like another link in a chain. If you choose to acquiesce, he watches you work for a moment, his expression unchanging. He makes a few quick notches in the tally stick with his knife, cracks it neatly in two, and hands you your half. It feels impossibly light in your hand. Without another word, he loads the sacks onto his horse, the animal grunting under the sudden weight. He mounts, turns the horse, and rides away, leaving you standing in the middle of your diminished future. The dust he kicks up seems to mock the clean air you were breathing just moments before. The sheer unfairness of it stings more than the autumn chill. You look at what remains. It is so much less than you had planned for, so much less than you need. You run the numbers in your head, counting the weeks until the first thaw of spring, and a familiar, cold dread begins to creep back in. The hope you felt this morning has been cut down just as surely as the grain. You now face a winter not of rebuilding, but of bare bones survival, a desperate stretch where every single meal will be a careful calculation. If your neighbor is your ally, they walk over once the reeve is gone. No words are needed. They simply place a hand on your shoulder for a moment, a small gesture of shared hardship. They have their own reckoning to face when the reeve reaches their plot, and you both know it. This small moment of connection does little to fill your empty sacks, but it eases the crushing sense of isolation. It is a reminder that you are not the only one suffering under this new, harsh reality. You are all bound by the same invisible chains. Standing alone in your field, you look down at the meager piles that are left for you. The work is not done. You still have to thresh and winnow, to separate the grain from the chaff. But the energy has drained out of you, replaced by a weariness that goes deep into your bones. The physical labor ahead seems small compared to the emotional weight of what just happened. You have been reminded of your place in the world, not as a resilient survivor, but as a tenant, a serf, whose life and labor belong to another. The experience sharpens the edges of your world, making the coming dangers feel closer and more real. You had allowed yourself a moment of satisfaction, a brief taste of security earned through your own hard work. Now that feeling is gone, replaced by the bitter flavor of powerlessness. The cold weight of the reeve's judgment settles deep inside you, a feeling far heavier than any sack of grain he carried away. The world outside your hut has turned white and silent. A fine powder, the first real snow of winter, dusts every surface, muffling the familiar sounds of the village. Inside, you pull your thin wool blanket tighter around your shoulders, your breath misting in front of your face. The cold finds its way through every tiny gap in the wattle-and-daub walls, a persistent guest that cannot be turned away. Your eyes fall upon the grain sack in the corner. It sags, looking pitifully empty. The memory of the reeve's visit, of him taking what felt like far too much of your harvest, is a bitter knot in your stomach. Because you stood silent then, choosing survival over defiance, your winter stores are dangerously low. That decision means every single meal between now and the spring thaw is a victory you have not yet won.
This pressing reality is what drives you from the relative warmth of your bedding. You move towards the small hearth, the embers from last night long dead. Just as you begin to contemplate the miserable task of searching for dry kindling, a soft knock comes at your door. It's the village priest, a man whose back is more bent each season, his face a web of fine lines etched by worry and prayer. He does not enter, but stands on your threshold, a gust of frigid air swirling around him. He explains, his voice quiet but clear over the sighing of the wind, that the snow has found a weakness in the church roof, directly over the altar. He asks for your help, for a strong back and steady hands to make a repair before the next fall of snow can do real damage. In return, he offers what he can, a blessing and a share of the church's tithe bread for your labor. His offer hangs in the cold space between you. The promise of bread, a guaranteed reward for a day's work, is a powerful lure. Your stomach clenches at the thought of it, solid, nourishing, real. It is the safe path. Yet, another part of you looks past the priest, towards the woods bordering the village. The fresh snow will make animal tracks easy to follow. A well-placed snare, checked now before the snow gets too deep, could yield a rabbit. A rabbit would not just be a meal. It would be meat and fur and fat, a treasure beyond compare. This is the gamble, the path of greater risk, for a reward that could change the course of your winter. The priest's offer is a small certainty, while the woods hold a desperate, flickering hope. Your gaze returns to the priest's worn face, to the earnest plea in his eyes. You remember the shared watches with your neighbor, the simple strength found in not facing the darkness alone. That small act of trust had made the nights feel less threatening. Perhaps this is a similar moment. The certainty of the bread, however small, feels more substantial than the ghost of a rabbit in the woods. You give a slow nod. A sense of relief washes over the old man's face. He tells you to meet him at the church when you are ready. The hunger gnawing at you is a painful reminder of what you might be giving up, but the thought of a definite meal is enough to push aside the doubt. You are choosing the community, the church, and the known reward
over the lonely gamble in the wild.
The work is harder and colder than you imagined. High on the church roof, the wind has no obstacle and cuts straight through your woolen tunic. You pull your simple hood tighter, but it does little to stop the chill that creeps into your bones. Your fingers, already stiff with cold, fumble with the wet, freezing thatch. You work alongside the priest, who directs you with a steady voice, his own hands surprisingly nimble as he weaves new straw into the old. From this height, you can see the entire village laid out below, a collection of snow-dusted roofs and thin trails of smoke rising from the few chimneys. The world looks clean and peaceful from up here, a stark contrast to the struggle for warmth and food happening below. Each movement is an effort, your muscles aching from the cold and the awkward posture, but you push onward, driven by the promised payment. As you lay the last patch of thatch and secure it with a daub of freezing mud and straw, the priest places a hand on your shoulder. He looks at the repair, then at you, and gives a simple, grateful nod. The work is done. Descending the rickety ladder feels treacherous, your limbs clumsy and numb. Inside the church, the air is still and intensely cold, the stone walls seeming to pull the warmth from your body. The only light comes from a single tallow candle sputtering near the altar, smelling faintly of burnt animal fat. The priest leads you to a small alcove where a rough-spun sack rests on a wooden chest. From it, he pulls a small, dark loaf of bread. It is not large, but it feels heavy and dense in your hands. He murmurs a blessing, words you only half understand, but the sincerity in his voice is a comfort against the chill. He explains that as long as the church has bread to share, a portion will be set aside for you each week for your service. It is not a promise of plenty, but a promise against starvation. This small act of charity, of community support, feels more valuable than a dozen rabbits. It is a fragile thread of security in a world where such things have become rare. You thank him, your voice hoarse from the cold, and turn to leave, clutching the loaf to your chest. The feel of its weight against your body is a profound relief, a solid presence against the gnawing emptiness in your gut.
Back in your hut, the small loaf sits on your rough wooden table. It is made of rye and barley, dark and coarse, but as you break off a piece, the earthy scent is the most wonderful thing you have ever known. The bread is chewy and dense, and you eat it slowly, making each bite last. It is not the rich taste of roasted meat you dreamed of, but it is real. It fills your stomach, silencing the constant, aching hunger for the first time in what feels like an age. The feeling of fullness spreads through you, a deep and calming warmth that has nothing to do with the fire you have yet to build. It is the feeling of a good decision made, of labor rewarded. The wind continues its low moan outside, and you know the winter has only just begun. The path ahead remains uncertain, and your meager stores are still a constant source of worry. But as you sit in the growing twilight of your small home, a new feeling settles within you. It is not hope exactly, for that feels too grand a word. It is something quieter, more resilient. You look at your hands, chapped and sore from the day's labor on the roof, and see the tangible result of that work resting on your table. You understand, in a way you hadn't before, that survival is not just about taking risks, but also about building connections, about giving and receiving help. The loaf of bread is more than just a meal. It is a link to the village, to the priest, to a structure larger than yourself. It represents a choice to trust in the small certainties offered by others rather than chasing the fading promises of the wild. As you prepare to bank the embers of your fire for the night, the weight of the bread in your stomach is a comforting anchor. You feel the deep ache of tired muscles and the sting of cold, scoured skin, but you also feel a quiet strength. The world has been reshaped by loss and fear, but you realize that the act of rebuilding is not always a solitary struggle. Sometimes it is a shared burden, mending one small piece of the world at a time.
The worst of the winter seems to have passed. The biting wind that scraped at the daub of your hut has softened to a persistent, damp chill. For weeks, the world was a study in white and gray, but now patches of dark, muddy earth appear like wounds in the thinning snow. Each morning, you hear the slow, steady drip of melting ice from the thatch of your roof, a sound that is both a promise and a warning. It is the sound of survival, a rhythm that marks the passing of another night endured. The small, dense loaf of bread you receive from the priest every few days has been the difference between misery and starvation. It is not much, but its reliability is a comfort you hold on to, a small anchor in a world that still feels dangerously adrift. This routine, the work on the church roof exchanged for sustenance, has given these last cold weeks a structure they otherwise would have lacked. Building on this small foundation of security, you have started to venture farther from your hut again, checking the snare lines you've maintained in the woods. The work is familiar, the motions of your hands knowing and sure as you check the hazel loops and reset the triggers. One afternoon, while resetting a snare near a thicket of gorse, you feel it, the distinct sensation of being watched. You freeze, every muscle tense, your senses straining to catch a sound or a movement. There is nothing but the drip of water from the branches and the distant caw of a crow. You tell yourself it is just the loneliness of the woods playing tricks on you, a common feeling now that the paths are no longer filled with the sounds of other villagers. Yet, as you turn to leave, a flicker of movement at the edge of your vision makes you pause again. It is gone as quickly as it appeared, a brief, fleeting shape that was too small to be a deer and too quick to be a fox. Over the following days, the feeling returns, always when you are focused on a task. You see the shadow again, darting between the skeletal trunks of the silver birches. This time, you get a clearer look. It is a child, no more than 10 years old, wrapped in threadbare rags that do little to ward off the damp cold. They are thin, with a wiry quickness that speaks of long practice in the art of not being seen. They never come close, never make a sound, but you notice something that sends a shiver down your spine. They are watching your hands. When you fashion a new snare, you later find a clumsy, smaller version of it a short distance away, made with brittle twigs and vine. When you dig for edible roots at the base of an oak, you see the next day that the ground nearby has been disturbed by small, desperate hands. The child is not just watching, they are trying to learn. This realization settles in your stomach like a cold stone. The child is an orphan, another piece of driftwood left behind by the great wave of sickness that swept everything away. And they are alone, mimicking your actions because they have no one else to teach them. A part of you, the part that has fought and scraped and hoarded every grain, calculates the cost of this knowledge. Another mouth to feed is a terrifying prospect. You count your resources in your head. The small bag of grain you have left, the few strips of salted meat hanging from the rafters, and the daily bread from the priest. It is barely enough for one. Sharing it would mean returning to the gnawing hunger you have only just managed to keep at bay. Your shelter is small, the warmth from your fire precious. Taking another person in means sharing everything, stretching your fragile existence to its breaking point.
However, a different part of you sees not a burden, but a reflection. You look at the child's hunched shoulders and remember your own despair in the first days of the stillness. You recall the gnawing emptiness of your hut, a silence that was louder than any scream. You have survived, yes, but you are alone, a solitary stalk of wheat in a field that has been burned to the ground. The sight of this child fighting with the same desperate tenacity you possess stirs a feeling you thought had been buried under layers of fear and grief. It is the echo of community, the ghost of a shared world. To turn your back on them feels like turning your back on a piece of your own past, leaving a smaller version of yourself to face the wolves alone. This choice is not about the next meal, but about the future and what it means to be a person in the world that remains. For several days, you do nothing, locked in this silent struggle. You continue your work, always aware of the small shadow flitting at the edges of your perception. You see them fail, their small snares empty, their digging fruitless. Each sign of their struggle is another twist of the knife in your gut. One evening, as the light begins to fade and a cold mist rises from the thawing ground, you are walking back to your hut. You can feel their presence behind you, a faint sound of a footstep on wet leaves, farther back than usual, as if their energy is finally giving out. Inside your small leather pouch is half of the priest's loaf, your supper for the night. The thought of giving it away makes your stomach clench with a phantom hunger. It is your security, your reward for a day's labor.
Your hand rests on the pouch, your fingers feeling the rough texture of the bread through the leather. The pragmatic voice in your head screams that survival is a solitary act, that charity is a luxury for a different world, not this one. It reminds you of the faces of the sick, of the brutal truth that looking after your own is the only law that matters now. But as you picture the small, clumsy snare made of broken twigs, another thought pushes through. What is the point of surviving? Only to be the last one. To live in a world with no one to teach, no one to help, no one to share the silence with. The weight of this loneliness, you realize, might be heavier than the burden of sharing your food. It is a choice between guarding your life as it is or investing in the faint possibility of a life that is more than just breathing in and out. You stop walking. The footsteps behind you halt immediately. Slowly you turn. The child is half hidden behind a large oak. Only one wide, fearful eye visible. They are poised to run, a wild creature ready to bolt at the first sign of threat. You do not move closer, knowing it would only frighten them away. Instead, you reach into your pouch, your decision made not in your head, but in the motion of your arm. You pull out the piece of bread. It feels dense and heavy in your palm. For a moment you hesitate, the animal instinct for self-preservation making one last powerful appeal. You fight it down. You are more than just an animal. Breaking the bread in two is a surprisingly loud sound in the quiet woods. You place one half on a moss-covered stump by the side of the path, making sure your movements are slow and deliberate. You do not look at the child directly, keeping your gaze lowered as a sign that you are not a threat. Then, without a word, you turn and continue your walk home, the remaining piece of bread clutched in your hand. You do not look back to see if they take it. You do not need to. The air behind you feels different. The quality of the silence has changed. It is now no longer just empty. It is now filled with a fragile, unspoken question. That night, as you eat your smaller portion of supper, the hut does not feel quite as empty. The fire seems to cast fewer menacing shadows on the walls. The next morning, as you step outside, you see a small, carefully piled stack of dry twigs and kindling resting near your door. It is not much, but it is more than you had yesterday. It is a response, a sign that your gesture was received and understood. You look towards the woods, but see nothing. The shadow is gone, for now. Yet you know this is not an ending. It is the beginning of something new and terrifyingly uncertain. The risk you have taken is immense, a gamble with your own survival as the stake. Your carefully managed resources will now be strained in ways you cannot yet fully predict. This single act of reaching out has complicated your life immensely, adding a new layer of worry to your existence. But as you pick up the kindling, the dry wood feeling light and smooth in your hands, you also feel a flicker of something else. It is not hope, not yet, but a sense of purpose beyond your own heartbeat, your own hunger. You are no longer just a survivor.
You are now a teacher, a guardian, a link in a chain that had been broken. Looking out at the gray morning, you understand that rebuilding a world is not a grand act. It does not happen with a king's decree or a priest's prayer. It happens in the small, quiet moments, in the breaking of bread, in the sharing of warmth, in the passing of knowledge from one hand to another. It is slow, painstaking work, filled with risk and the constant threat of failure. Your path forward has just become steeper and more difficult. Yet, for the first time in a long time, you feel you are not walking it entirely by yourself. The quiet understanding that now exists between you and the watcher in the woods has become a part of your own fragile existence.
The last of the winter's chill has finally broken its grip on the land. A gentle warmth coaxes green shoots from the dark, damp earth, and the air no longer bites at your exposed skin. Instead, it carries the clean scent of wet soil and the faintest hint of budding leaves from the woods. The work you did for the priest, mending the church roof in the bitter cold, proved to be a lifeline. The small portions of bread he shared were just enough to supplement your dwindling stores, keeping the worst of the winter hunger from your door. That act of service, born from a need for certainty, saw you through the season of death and into this season of fragile rebirth. Now, as you stand by your small hut, you can feel the promise of the world awakening in the very ground beneath your feet. This newfound sense of peace is interrupted by the familiar, rhythmic sound of a horse's hooves on the muddy track leading to your home. It is the reeve, the Lord's manager, a man whose presence has always signaled a demand or a reckoning. You watch his approach, your body tensing by habit. Beside you, the young orphan you took in mimics your stance, their eyes wide and fixed on the approaching figure. Their presence is a constant reminder of the choice you made, to share what little you had, to invest in another life. The reeve dismounts, his boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. He does not look at you with the hard, dismissive gaze you remember from the harvest. Instead, his eyes move from your small, well-tended plot of land to the neat stack of firewood, and finally to the child at your side. He gestures with a gloved hand to the long, fallow strip of earth that runs adjacent to your own, a plot left empty since the sickness took the family that once worked it. That land lies idle, the reeve says, his voice flat and practical. The Lord has no use for weeds. You have proven you can survive. You have an apprentice. He looks at the orphan, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. You may work that strip. It will be added to your tenancy. Your labor, your taxes will be doubled. But your harvest could be doubled as well. The offer hangs between you, simple and immense. It is not a gift, but a wager. He is betting on your strength, and he expects the Lord's share of the winnings.
The reeve's words sink into you, heavier than any stone you cleared from the Lord's fields. You find yourself looking at your hands, at the calloused skin and the dirt ground deep into every line. These hands have learned to set snares, to mend thatch, to wield a hoe. They have scraped a life from the edge of nothing.
You look at the small plot you currently farm, a patch of earth that felt impossibly large when you first began. It is familiar now, manageable. You know its every dip and rise. It represents a fragile security, a known quantity of work, for a known, if meager, reward. The thought of doubling it, of facing twice the weeds, twice the stones, twice the back-breaking labor, makes a weariness settle deep in your bones. On the other hand, the memory of hunger is a ghost that never truly leaves. It was there in the gnawing emptiness of the first days, in the careful rationing of the last handful of grain, and in the lean months of winter. Your current plot provides just enough to get by, but never enough to get ahead. One bad storm, one blight, one season of poor luck, and you are right back where you started, teetering on the brink of starvation. This new land, this empty strip of earth, is more than just soil. It is a defense against that ghost. It is the chance for a full cellar, for a surplus to trade, for a future that is not defined by the constant, grinding fear of an empty stomach. It is a path away from the edge. You glance at the orphan. They are watching you, their expression a perfect mirror of the turmoil you feel inside. Their survival is now your responsibility. To refuse the Reeves offer is the safer choice, the one that guarantees you can likely provide for them as you have for yourself, just enough. It is a life of careful subsistence, of holding on to what you have. But to accept the offer is to strive for something more for them, a life with a margin of safety you have never known. It is a monumental risk. Failure would be catastrophic, plunging you both into a deeper poverty, indebted to a Lord who is not known for his mercy. Is it better to protect the little you have, or to risk it all for the chance of something better?
The entire journey of the past year seems to rush through your mind. You remember the terrifying stillness after the plague, the desperate walk to the stream for clean water, the face of your neighbor pleading for a share of your grain. You recall the weight of the Reeves authority, the struggle to protect your small harvest from his measure, the bitter cold of the wind against your face as you worked on the church roof. Each step was about survival, about making it to the next sunrise, the next season. This moment, however, feels different. This choice is not about surviving today. It is about deciding what kind of life you will build for all the tomorrows to come. The fear of failure is a cold knot in your stomach, but the hope of a different future is a tiny, stubborn warmth. You let out a breath you did not realize you were holding. The path of caution is the path of your past, a circle of hardship that you have walked over and over. The path of ambition is a straight line into the unknown, fraught with danger, but holding the only real promise of escape. You have learned so much in this hard year, not just how to find food and mend a roof, but how to endure, how to adapt, how to see a chance when it appears. You look from the fallow ground to the Reeves' impassive face. A decision forms, solid and heavy. You will not spend the rest of your life clinging to the edge. You give the Reeve a single, sharp nod. I will work the land, you hear yourself say, the words sounding stronger than you feel. There is no triumph in the moment,
only the immense weight of the task ahead. The reeve shows no surprise. He simply nods back, as if confirming a fact he already knew. The seed will be accounted for. See that the Lord's portion is worthy of his generosity, he says, before turning, mounting his horse, and riding away without another word. His departure leaves a silence broken only by the chirping of a bird in a nearby tree.
You stand there for a long moment, looking at the overgrown strip of land that is now yours to tame. It is a field of weeds and rocks, a testament to loss and abandonment. But as you look, you also see the dark, rich soil beneath. You see rows of grain shimmering in a future summer. You see a harvest large enough to fill your stores with plenty to spare. The orphan steps up beside you, their small shoulder pressing against your arm. They too are looking at the field, not with fear, but with a quiet determination that reflects your own. You have chosen the harder path, the one of greater burdens, but also of greater hope. You have taken root in this place, a future waiting in the furrows you will plow. As our journey through the trials of medieval survival comes to a close for tonight, let the quiet moments of that era guide you toward rest. Picture the end of a day not marked by clocks, but by the fading light. The last of the day's work is done, the tools are put away, and the heavy wooden door is barred against the gathering stillness. The hearth fire is banked, its embers glowing with a deep, steady warmth that promises to last through the night. This was the essence of nightly survival, securing a small circle of peace against the vast, quiet dark. The need for that sanctuary, a place to let the body and mind mend, is a thread that connects us directly to that distant past. So let the worries of your own day fade like those glowing embers. May the simple, profound peace of a world settled into slumber grant you comfort. Sleep well.